In this video, we are going to look at the brutal facts of the Philippines. What is the reality that we're facing in the Philippines, and what might it look like to see no place left in the Philippines where people have yet to hear the good news of Jesus? So in the Philippines, there is an estimated population of approximately 110 million people. And out of this population, those that are lost, that are far from God, that have no hope in this life or in the life to come, are approximately 100 million. And this is what we long to see God change, to God impact. So, social scientists say that if 10% of a population is actively sharing about something, everyone in that population will hear about it. So, to dream and maybe even strategize about what it would look like to see no place left in the Philippines. What if 10% of the lost, of this 100 million people, came to faith and became seed sowers? So I'm going to put 10% are seed sowers. So that would mean we have 10 million seed sowers in the Philippines. But if these 10 million came to faith from the lost, we would want to see them discipled and trained and equipped how to follow Jesus and make disciples, to share their faith. And the best place to do that is in the context of churches, right? So we would need new churches. So here are churches needed. And we are going to just say, for the sake of math, 10 people in each church. So how many churches will we need for these 10 million people? If 10 people meet in each church, it'd be 1 million churches, right? And so this is a big goal, a big dream here. See 1 million churches planted in the Philippines. But let's just look and see, what if God were to multiply disciples and churches? How long could it possibly take to see this happen? So we're going to do a little bit of math here. And we're going to look at years and then the number of churches. So let's imagine that in this first year, you and maybe there's a group of you that are working together are seeking to plant churches among the lost, simple, reproducing house churches, 10 people each. And after a year, you guys start 2 house churches from the lost. And you train them, equip them, and teach them how they can go do the same, make disciples and start new churches. And each year, each church starts 1 more church. So every year, the number of churches doubles, right? So these 2 churches, they go out, each of them starts 1 church. So after 2 years, now there are 4 churches. And this continues every year. The number of churches doubles by each church just starting 1 church from the lost. So after 3 years, there's 8 churches. And 4, 16 churches. 5, there's 32 churches. 6, there's 64 churches. 7, 128 churches. 8, 256 churches. And our goal, right, is to see 1 million churches started from the lost. And so we've still got a long ways to go, right? We're at 256. Then after 9, there's 512 churches. After 10, 1,024. 11, 2,048. 12, 4,096. 13, there would be 8,000. I'm going to round up to make this simple. 8,200. 14 would be 16,400. 15 would be 32,800. 16 would be 64,000. We'll just say 65,000 to make it simple. 17 years, there'd be 130,000 churches. 18 years, 260,000 churches. 19 years, we're at 520,000 churches. And then finally, 20 years, there are 1,040,000 churches, 40,000 churches started from the lost by the power of multiplication, by each church starting one more church from the lost. So in 20 years, see 1 million plus churches started from the lost, right? And this is by each church starting one more church every year. Now, if each church were to start one church every 6 months, we could see this happen, 1 million churches from the lost in just 10 years, right? So this is amazing. This is a work of God if he were to do it. Now, have we seen in the Bible a time where God, in a short period of time, got the gospel out to a large population of people? Yes, I want to show you one example of this, and that's Acts 19, verses 8 to 10. So it says, he entered the synagogue, this is Paul, and for 3 months spoke boldly, reasoning and persuading them about the kingdom of God. But when some became stubborn and continued in unbelief, speaking evil of the way before the congregation, he withdrew from them and took the disciples with him, reasoning daily in the hall of Tyrannus. This continued for 2 years, so that all the residents of Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jews and Greeks. So Paul here in Acts 19, 8 through 10, Paul, he's in Ephesus. He gets kicked out of the synagogue. He goes to this hall of Tyrannus. And for 2 years, he's teaching, discipling, training up people in Ephesus. And the result is that all the residents of Asia heard the gospel in 2 years. In just 2 years. Paul didn't travel around and go to every place in Asia. He was there in Ephesus teaching, training, but the disciples there took the message of the gospel out. And the result that was all of Asia, which was a population of approximately 10 million people, heard the good news of Jesus in just 2 years. So, yeah, this population, 100 million, is bigger than 10 million, but could God do this in the next 10 years, 5 years, 15, 20 years? Yes, we serve the same God that Paul served 2,000 years ago, and he can do the same thing in our day, in our context, but it will be costly. John 12:24. I want to read this one verse for you. If we want to see this happen, if we're serious about seeing God move in this way, it will be costly. John 12, verse 24. Jesus says, truly I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. So here's my question for you. Are you willing to give your life or even die for this vision? Jesus said, unless we're willing to die, to deny ourselves, to lay down our lives, to sacrifice our time, our energy, our reputation, our comforts, unless we're willing to give up our lives, sacrifice ourselves for him, his kingdom, his mission, we will bear no fruit. But if we do, if we die, if we sacrifice ourselves and give our lives for his sake, for this vision, we will bear much fruit. So I encourage you, practice this, pray about this, and ask God to use you to see no place left across the Philippines.